My name is Chauncey Douglas King,
And birth date?
July 18th, 1946,
All right. What war did you serve in?
in the Vietnam War, even though it wasn't a declared war.
Right. Branch?
I was in the Army.
All right. Your rank?
I ended up being an E4 Specialist 5th Class.
All right. And it is the 22nd of May,
Excuse me,
2017.
that's E5
Oh,
Specialist 5th Class.
E5. All right. No problem. And again, it's the 22nd of May, 2017. I am related to you, and this interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress. All right. So now we can start. So where did you grow up?
I grew up basically in Casper, Wyoming. I was 11 months old when we moved here.
All right. And you graduated high school there?
I graduated from high school from Natrona County High School in 1964.
All right. And did you play any sports, have any hobbies?
Uh, no, I worked most of the time, so I didn't really have time for sports. I did a few things in junior high. I played football in junior high, but that was about it.
Right. What kind of jobs did you do?
I worked for our family. My dad had a bicycle store, so I worked there.
All right. And how did you get into the service? Did you join right after high school or?
No, I went to Casper College, which is a 2 year junior college for 2 years. Then I went to University of Wyoming for a year and a half, and then I got drafted in June of 1968.
Right. And did you have any other family members that ever served in the military?
My brother was in the Wyoming Air National Guard.
All right. Um, so for your early days of service, did you have what was it like adapting to military life?
The biggest adaptation was getting along with everybody else and having everybody else get along with you. We were there for a common goal, and that was to help each other out and get through the 2 years that we were putting in.
Right. Where were you stationed at? Where'd you go first?
I got drafted and I took the oath of induction in Denver, Colorado. And then that evening we flew out and ended up in El Paso, Texas, going to Fort Bliss for basic training. They call it BCT, Basic Combat Training.
Right.
And we're there for 2 months. And then, let's see, I guess it was Labor Day weekend, which was the end of August. After our 8 weeks of basic training, I got sent to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, outside of Lawton, Oklahoma, and was there for another 2 months and graduated from what they called AIT, Advanced Individual Training, and that was at an artillery complex. I was going to be an artilleryman, and I graduated from there the end of October, and I had about 14 days leave, and I had orders for Vietnam, and I had to report to Oakland, California on the 16th of November of 1968.
Right. Where in Vietnam were you stationed first?
Uh, my home base was a little place called Phu Loy. At that time, I believe it was run by the First Division. That was who was in charge of it, and then the 82nd Airborne ended up being in charge of that outpost at that time. We were part of the 23rd Artillery Group, which was part of 2nd Field Forces.
All right. And what exactly was your job over there with the artillery?
I finally got assigned to a firing battery, and the firing battery had 105 millimeter howitzers. And when I checked in at the orderly room, the clerk looked at my records and then called the first sergeant over, and they were chatting, and I thought, oh boy, I screwed up. I filled out something wrong, and now I'm in deep trouble. Then they went in and talked to the battery commander. Then they came out and they asked me a question. They said, would you consider OJTing for the clerk's job? That's on the job training. And they said that the clerk was going to be leaving in a month or so, and they were looking for a replacement. And according to the test scores I had and all, and that I could type, they were wanting me to maybe OJT for that position. And until he did leave, I would be the battery commander's driver and also be the mail clerk for our firing battery. So I was there I was in Vietnam for almost 15 months, but I was a clerk for, up until November of 69, and then my replacements came in, and so then I was just doing NCO work, non-commissioned officers work, until I left. In fact, I ended up being sergeant of the guard in Phuc Vinh. We moved to another little base called Phuc Vinh. We didn't have anybody to be in charge of the convoys taking stuff up there. And so they made me the head of the convoy. And that was the closest I had ever been to any action prior to that time.
Really?
But I spent the last couple months up in Phuc Vinh province.
Okay. So you didn't see much of the battles or action besides that
Not
convoy?
any direct stuff. I did get one morning as I came out of the mess hall in Phuc Vinh, we got incoming rockets. We got some 122 millimeter rockets that came in, and they got pretty close. In fact, there's a couple pieces of shrapnel that
yeah.
I picked up right within arm's reach of where I was laying down.
Wow.
So that was the closest I came to anything.
Right. Did you form any friendships while serving?
I formed a few good friendships. It's sort of hard to keep track of everybody because you don't stay in that company or a battery forever, like
Right.
in other wars. They stayed there until they went home, where we rotated out every 12 months. So
Right.
it got to be a little hard. I've had contact with one guy up in Montana. Our old mess sergeant was in New Jersey. I had some contact with him. I still have a lot of memories of all the people and names and addresses.
Right. You said you moved around a lot. Did you go all over the place in Vietnam?
Not really. My main thing was back at base camp at Phu Loy.
Right.
I was in charge of our orderly room, and I could take mail out to the guys out in the field when they were out in the field, but they always had somebody going, and I didn't have to ever go. Not that I would not have gone. I would have liked to have gone, really. They'd airlifted us out on helicopters, whether they were either a Chinook or a Huey, but I never went.
Right.
I had other duties. I ended up being, I was a driver too. I'd take some of the officers to Saigon for do paperwork when they had to go for different things, or to go to Tan Son Nhut Air Base to the morgue there to identify somebody. We had 2 KIAs while I was there, which unfortunately happened.
Right. Did you enjoy being a driver?
Yes, it got me out of the office to where I could do some different things and see some different things, but we were always prepared for what would possibly happen on the road. We were about 30 miles from Saigon.
Right.
And I always carried my weapons. My authorized weapons were a .45 caliber pistol and a grenade launcher.
Right. What was the highest ranking officer you drove around?
Probably a major, but
Major.
usually it was a captain.
Right. Cool. How did you or did you stay in touch with people back at home while in Vietnam?
Uh, it was strictly by letter.
Right.
Uh, all we had to do was uh, have the return address, and then where the stamp would go, we wrote free, and it would come to the states free. There would be no charge.
Well, that was nice then. So not much of a
Uh,
process.
no, very, very simple. Mail came in pretty quickly too for us. Some people got to go on, I think it was called MAPS. It was a military um, telephone system that relied on shortwave radio and the shortwave guys in the States, and they would sort of link up telephones and the shortwave to get to talk to people. But they always let some of the other guys that were out in the field have that chance to do it rather than myself.
Right. Right. Um, so what did you do in your free time when you weren't working?
We had to stay right at base camp because most of the time we had part of our guns there at the base. We were right at the perimeter, so we had to protect the perimeter.
Right.
And so consequently, we couldn't really leave in case something happened if they got a fire mission. So we had our own NCO club, our own EM club, which is the Enlisted Men's Club, and we would have sometimes films, uh, nightly films, maybe once a week. We'd have barbecues. We played volleyball. We played baseball, but it was strictly our particular unit.
Right. You had to stay on base.
All right.
Right. So did you ever like fire any artillery at all?
I did both at Fort Sill and in Vietnam. I'd go down and help the guys on the guns if they needed help, if they were shorthanded or something. Because we had people coming and going, both rotating back to the States or else on R&R, or maybe somebody was sick or something. And so I'd go down and help them.
All right. And were they aimed at the enemy's location, just kind of bombarding them all the time?
They'd get what they call a fire mission that says we've got, and they'd give them the location on the map where they were, and then they would work up what the charges and the ballistics of the shot that they wanted to fire, and then they'd fire it. We'd shoot up to maybe 7 miles away.
Really? And were those accurate shots once you got all the coordinates and stuff?
Yes, after we got all the coordinates, we'd get a call back from either a air observer or on the ground guy and said you were right on or whatever.
Right.
One time, in fact, the guys were right on, and they'd had wanted some explosive charges sent out there, and unfortunately, somehow Papa San and some of his water buffalo were killed, and we got on the hot seat for it.
Oh.
But they put the rounds right where they were supposed to, so it wasn't our fault, but we got called on the carpet for it.
Right. You just shot where you were supposed to.
Right.
Right. Okay. Well. So how did they tell you that you were going home?
Well, being as I was the clerk, all the paperwork and everything would come through my hands,
Right.
and I would see all the orders coming in, and we had actually orders for everything that happened. Joe Blow, you leave Vietnam on such and such a date. You report on such and such a date at your new duty station, but I had orders for actually Fort Sill, Oklahoma again. And I didn't want to go back to Fort Sill, so I extended for almost 3 months in order to get out of the service. If we left Vietnam with less than 5 months of active service left, we could get out of the service and get credit for our 24 months. So I actually spent just a day or two over 19 months active duty.
Right. And then did you fly back home right away, or did you make another stop?
Well, we flew into Oakland, California, and we rotated out there. And then after we left there, I got on a plane and flew into Denver and stayed at my sister's for a night, and then I flew home the next day.
Right. Were you excited to get home? Eager?
Oh yeah, of course. As your time in country got less and less, they called you a two-digit midget if you had 99 days or less.
Okay.
And so you would count down, and you'd see the big airliners come in to Tan Son Nhut Air Base, and you'd say, "I've got 15 more days, and that's going to be my plane."
Huh.
So you've spent there all that much time, and you don't know what's going to go on until you get on that plane.
Right. Definitely. And how was your adjustment being back in the United States and back in civilian life?
I would say it went very, very well. I was very blessed with the job I ended up getting and the things I was able to do, and all. I can't say I ever saw any major skirmishes or major problems, which the good Lord protected me from that.
Right.
But it wasn't a traumatic thing. I didn't ever really have a run-in with anybody that were protesting, so I was very lucky.
Right. Now, what job did you get once you got back to the States?
Well, I went back to work in our family business, in the bicycle business. We were a Schwinn bicycle dealership.
Right.
And so I went back to work there and stayed there till I retired.
Nice. How has your experience in war affected your life probably the most?
Um, it makes you um, realize how you have to get along with other people, and to realize that we're here to get along. We don't want to really have conflicts, and
Right.
it's just good all around learning. And it's the same thing in college. When you're in a dorm, you have to get along with everybody.
Right. Definitely. What was your favorite moment or thing you saw in Vietnam?
That freedom bird, as I saw it in the sky for several days before I left, mine was coming up. That was probably the neatest thing.
Right.
And then, at night when they'd have the gunships out in the jungle firing, we called it raining pea down on the enemy. They had tracers in their miniguns, and it just looked like a big red line going, just waving in the dark sky.
Right.
That was neat. There were a lot of the old villages and plantations I would have loved to have gone out and walked through, but you didn't dare because you didn't know who was there, or if they were booby trapped or what. So.
Right. So you didn't get to see much of the landscape besides your
Other
base?
than from the highways.
Right. Definitely. And like you said, you never had any really run-ins with any of the enemy?
No, not really. Other than the guy that cut my hair in they called it a gook shop. A gook is technically a foreigner. We were really the gooks, but they called the Vietnamese the gooks.
Right.
But there was a guy there that was a barber, and he'd cut hair. and all of a sudden he disappeared. We didn't see him for a long time, and somebody said that he was a Viet Cong sympathizer, and he was arrested, and he'd cut my hair for months. So,
well, that'd be kind of strange to learn that.
yeah.
Wow.
And probably the other worst thing was when I was running convoys up to Phuc Vinh after I'd had my replacement come in. We had to sandbag our deuce and a halfs with 3 layers of sandbags of 50 caliber up on top of the cab of the truck, and we had gunships that were escorting us. So that's glad to be over when that happened.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So what else would you like to say that I haven't really mentioned yet? Is there anything?
Well, I didn't like being drafted.
Right.
It wasn't the most pleasant thing I wanted to do. But I had a duty and an obligation, and I was willing to fulfill it.
Right.
I had a lot of respect for, we had some conscientious objectors that did take the oath down in Denver, but they didn't take the step forward, and they were willing to go into a non-combative job. And I had a lot of respect for those guys too. But just to learn what the military does and all, it's just an awe-inspiring thing.
Right.
And they put me in good shape for several months, probably the best shape I'd ever been in. But I did get out of shape very quickly.
Well, yes. All right. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add or say?
No, I just like to say, God bless this country, and may it always stand up for the individual and the rights of the individual. And the only other thing is that we need to support our veterans. It wasn't until a few years ago that I found out that all veterans that were exposed to Agent Orange were automatically qualified for military or for medical help. And I found out that the thing was, everybody that was in Vietnam were exposed to Agent Orange in some degree.
Right.
And so they are taking care of all the guys. The guy I know up in Montana has got extreme heart issues, and they relate it all back to Agent Orange. And other people have got all kinds of headaches from it, from cancers to Parkinson's disease. There's a million issues from that Agent Orange, which was a defoliant that they sprayed over the jungles to defoliate everything so the enemy could be seen easier.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank goodness you're standing strong still.
Yep. Knock on wood.
Oh, yes, definitely. All right. Well, thank you so much, Uncle Doug.
You're welcome, Sam. It was
really
a pleasure.
Appreciate it.